Well, welcome back, everyone. This is Jack Smith again, and today I have Chris here. Hey, Chris, how you doing?
Hi, Jack. Pleased to be here with you.
Well, thank
What
you.
an opportunity!
Well, wow. Do I feel the sarcasm flowing into the room here, or are we
I
good?
don't know what you're talking about.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I got you. I asked you to join here because today I want to yabble a bit about domains, and that seems to be stuff that you might be a little bit of acquainted with.
Been there for a couple of years, sure.
Lovely. So, no, I was gonna discuss about in all our merger and acquisition processes. So when you buy a company, they seem to have all kind of internet-facing things with websites, with email, and their domains. And I just wanted to share a bit on how it works and how you transfer those and to the new ownerships and all the problems that come with it. So welcome to Fun with Domains.
Domania. Yes, I mean, you mentioned it all already, so I think we're done here. No,
Well, thank you for tuning in. See you next month.
no, seriously, I mean, domains, yes. What can I say about them? Domains and DNS. Well, I mean, certainly, especially if you're a small business, you have to make sure when you register your domain that it's in the name of your web designer. So
Yes.
you can access it when you fire them or when they want to hold you hostage later on because you don't pay their bills or something like that.
There's a very good one that I was going to save for later. But,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
Jumping ahead right here.
Well, it's okay actually because it's a good one to keep in mind to always read your contract. One of the companies I was moving over, they had with their internet, they had their domain name through an internet provider. And the thing was, if they moved away one service, they would lose the complete internet service, including the domain name. So if we transferred
Nice.
the domain name, they would lose their entire telco contract.
Which is kind of actually a good advice and a good jump too, because I prefer to buy my domain name someplace else than the rest of the services.
Don't we all?
And so I have my direct control over that part. And if when the other stuff breaks down, when the other stuff breaks down, you still have at least have your domain name and can point it elsewhere.
That's the thing, indeed. So no, it's looking at some merger and acquisitions, M&As in the past. It's always something that's forgotten, like the domain names, because I always think about let's copy over the email. Let's do this from Google Cloud to Azure Cloud, do it from local to somewhere else. That's all fine, but then you have to tell the internet that the emails have moved.
Yeah.
And also your 5 gazillion websites. And what the fun always starts with the inventory, because you're contacting the old owners of who's running the company these days, and you ask them like, hey, can you please give me a list of your domain names? First you have to tell them what the domain name is.
And usually they will forget some of them too.
They will forget, and then they come back and they will give you 4 or 5, and then they forgot that they have 6, 7 others registered like in different languages in different countries, so they will have the .com, but also the .net and the .org, which they don't use, but that they have.
And they fell for the Chinese scam too about the domain registrations that somebody else is trying to register your domains. So they have those .cn domains that they will never use.
They have. I have seen domains registered in Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, Greece, everywhere that you could imagine. And indeed, you find out that they're paying 50, 60 euros a year per domain name for that just money being thrown out. And then, you're the lucky person that comes in to clean all of that up. It's a challenge, because if you're lucky, they're all registered at the same place. If you're not, then every person that once made an online web app for them, put it on its own domain name, does the own registration, and then you can find out what's where, and before you have the entire listing.
Yeah, the domain is like the unloved stepchild that is kind of important, but you kind of forget about it too, and you don't know who registered it. And like we said, your web designer, an old employee who's long gone, or where was registered because they knew somebody there or whatever, or it was a country level domain that you could only get at one registrar or something like that. Definitely interesting challenges. Or you're using shortcuts for your website in Bitly and bit.ly, that's Libya, a very stable country to rely on for your shortcuts in social media, of course. I mean, nothing against Bitly, but I'm just
True, that's Libya. Oh, yeah.
just think about those things when you pick your domains. Or you have a .tv and that island happens to be syncing to Valoo. And at one point, I mean, ICANN isn't very fast at shutting those down. So, I mean, there's little risk. The latest example for that is sorry, which one was it? Shit.
.shit.
Not shit doesn't exist yet. That's in the next round for new applications.
That's a good TLD.
Sorry, lost my train of thought. I think was it? Oh, .io. Sorry, yes, .io is recent. So the island, the the British Ocean island territories are changing potentially ownership to the Maldives, which is
and then the .io will
is a less stable government than
cease to exist.
And IO in theory doesn't exist anymore. But we've been sunsetting .su for the Soviet Union for a long time. And there's still domains being registered sometimes under it, which isn't really according to the rules, but hey.
Okay. No. I never had to go that far in my thing. There is and then once you have all the domain names, you have to get all the information. And then when you're dealing with small businesses, the big mega corp that is doing the acquisition and wants to take control of the domain names, they will ask you a simple question: "Hi, can you please provide me the zone files?"
Yeah, well, that's pretty simple, no?
For us, yes. But imagine that you are a small business of 5 folks and in the office and 10 in the workshop, and you're asking like, "Hi, can you give me your zone files?"
Yeah, so because that's going to be the next step before you transfer kind of the domains to your name servers, I guess I would say. I mean, how do you transfer zone files? Best thing is to print out a bind file, on paper and fax it over.
That doesn't work. I've been asking for zone files left and right, multiple registrars, and they at best they will go into some configuration webpage from the reseller of that the registrar uses. They're like, yes, this is our config, and you get a screenshot of a webpage with some.
I don't know any registrar that actually exports zone files for you.
No, nobody
or any
does.
DNS for provider. Yeah, so I mean, like, let's say you sign up for a new account at, I don't know if I want to mention, Cloudflare or whatever.
Somewhere,
and they try to guess all your records. Mm-hmm. That's usually not, I mean, they go for the standard ones, yes, but it may or may not work. Some internal interfaces may be missing.
Yeah. It's my preferred tool to get the zone files is just use the command line in Windows and its lookup. Just set a type to any, and then just get the domain, and then you will get most of it, but not everything.
Most name servers are not that generous anymore in their responses.
True.
Because it kind of helps other people too that try to there used to be an ls command too, and there is maybe you should even use a tool like a subdomain finder. I mean, that does exist, mostly used by people that are trying to do bad things on your domains, but maybe you can use those things as a tool as well.
I have to add it. I've always been using NSLOOKUP to just gather what I have, and then I know the A records, I know NEC names, I know the MX, I know the usual culprits. You can then just put in a sheet and give to Megacorp, who will configure it on their DNSs. Yeah. And then they come back, oh, by the way, we need to transfer the DNS, so can you please go ahead and disable DNSSEC on all those domains?
Oh, yeah, of course. We're DNSSEC already? I don't know. Yeah. I was thinking a good DNS company should also, just to take one step back quickly, should also be able to enable an actual zone file transfer. That's a thing in the protocol used between primary and secondary normally.
The authentication code is what they forget next.
Yeah, so that's well, kind of. Anyways, yes, DNSSEC should be disabled at least temporarily because
Yeah.
likely your signing is not going to work anymore after
Nope.
you transfer the zones.
It won't go anymore. And then you have the authentication code, and then pending your luck, they will make it valid for somewhere between 3 days and 3 months.
Well, the authentication code to transfer the domain now.
Yeah.
The actual domain, yes. That's definitely one of the next steps. And of course, to make it easier for you, the industry has established that there's different standards between all CCTLDs, like the country level domains, and like .de, .be, and so on, .dk, and versus the ICANN regulated generic top level domains. Is that a fair term? Yeah, I guess so.
Not close enough. I'll allow it.
Okay. Yeah, so everybody has their own standard for your pleasure. And of course, like Jack was already saying, you can kind of expect different expiries for the various codes. And there's a difference between transferring the domain to another registrar and transferring, or there can be a difference between transferring a domain to another registrar and transferring the ownership of the domain. In the ICANN world, that's kind of two different procedures.
Of course.
And in CCTLDs, they just do their own shit.
Well, because you can, or
They
maybe
make up their own shit, yes.
Yeah, because
I don't think we have to send any faxes in most countries nowadays anymore. .it doesn't do faxes anymore, I think. But
Yeah. I was yesterday evening. I was discussing with some other IT folks, and we were still like, because you mentioned faxes, we were actually discussing telex over IP.
oh wow, yes,
So sending a fax is pretty modern.
I forgot about telex.
As long as you're not doing telex anymore to some faraway place that still has it switched on. You have gateways now. I think if you really, really, really want to send a telex, but the telex networks have been shut down in our part of the planet. So, but yeah, well, if you want confirmation faxes, even that would be a challenge because, if you live in a country that has stopped using faxes, you have a problem.
Like what you hear? Subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Every like, follow, and review helps us grow. Check out more at ithorrorstories.eu and drop us a message anytime at hello@ithorrorstories.eu. We'd love to connect. This podcast features Jack Smith and guests. We say thank you to our demo scene friends who helped making this podcast possible. Commander Homer for editing, Danko for music and audio advice, NetPoet for additional voiceovers.
We now return to our episode of today.
So despite all of that, let's say you initiated the transfer, you likely need to approve it from all the outdated email addresses that are listed on the domain someplace.
Which will lead to point to mailboxes which are no longer read, email addresses which no longer exist.
And that's not a problem because somebody else already registered the domain for you in an attempt to steal your domain.
True, yeah. So that's half the work done.
They may have even read about your buying this company and maybe targeting you specifically. At this time.
Yeah, because usually my team usually comes in after Megacorp has made the announcement that things were going to be taken over. So then, yes,
you made yourself a target already. So
you are a target, and security-wise, that's a completely different episode. But that is certainly one.
So why not get everybody's help and transfer your domain someplace?
At least some place that you control, and not to, a little small business software developer Inc. that happens to resell some domain names left and right. Indeed.
Yeah, but seriously, make sure like your admin email address and the ones of the companies that you buy, like that you control all of those domains
that you
and
have
email boxes that relate to that, because if you don't, somebody else will take advantage of it.
Yeah, it is. It is really easy if there's some strange email address and then it's bye domain name.
That's right. Also, there may be some value in the domains that are in the other companies that you acquire.
Mm-hmm.
It's not unusual or not unknown that some of them may forget a domain name that was part of their assets and may just try to sell it elsewhere. Like something that is from an older business that they bought or something like that. There's a bunch of big companies that tend to collect domain names and having them collect dust in the corner
until somebody needs them.
They may have maybe some value in there as well. That if you're buying a company, why not, if you can, sell one of the domains that you include that you don't need anymore for
just
a couple of million?
Generic brand names. And there was a project once for a paint mixer, and they would have every brand of paint mixer they would have registered, and strong paint, green paint, white paint, road paint, dot a couple TLDs. So we ended up with 40, 50 domain names. And of course, green was registered on the left and white on the right because some guy in marketing said, we need those as well. And then you end up with contact email addresses going to random Gmail and Hotmail stuff because that's the default that they had.
Of course. I mean, there's lots of fun you can have with domains. I remember in the mid-1990s, there was a company that was in the baking sector or something like that, you could say, or like supplies for baking.
Yep.
And they had like 90 different domains. And one of my acquaintances around this time thought it would be funny to set up a system where you can set up your own email forwards. So you would have subdomains with dots in between. So you could say, I don't know, none of them was in English. I'm trying to think of a good example, but I don't know. Maybe I'll leave that because it might also need to be able to figure out which company that was.
I don't know. I have a good one for domain names which are stuck, and it's a public thing. That's if it's out on the internet. Our online shop of everything, Amazon. They have the .com, the .fr, the .de, the .co.uk, the .nl. They have them all, except one,
which is
.be.
Oh, of course, yes.
And it's not because of the Belgians. It is before Mr. Bezos started his online bookstore. There was an insurance company from Volvo that named their insurance company after one of the models, the Volvo Amazon, which was a model they sold in the 70s. So they had the copyright on the name back then in the 90s. And
in a different class, of course.
And they registered Amazon.be.
Perfectly legal.
Perfectly legal. There was, like, the internet didn't really exist all that much. There was no online bookstore. There certainly was no thing selling you online cloud services. And then, of course, big Amazon would like, hi, we would like to buy this domain name from you. And they said, nah, we'll keep it. And they've been offered large number of zeros. It's like, no, we don't. And I think even today, so the webshop did launch in Belgium.
Yeah.
But they're using amazon.com.be. So they acquire .com.be, or they're using it, or whatever. And now it's amazon.com.be, where everywhere else it is .de, .fr, .es, .com.
I guess they didn't go high enough in their offer then.
Well,
potentially, or they
it's like, yeah, or they don't know. But if you take the financing and the insurance from Volvo in Belgium, your insurance paper is from Amazon Belgium, the insurance company that has the domain name.
So I guess I need to keep it for that purpose too.
Just, yeah, it's if I could get away with annoying big Amazon for a reason,
of course,
I think we would all do it.
I mean, you had a similar chance recently when Elon Musk bought back Twitter, or now as it's called X, he actually decided to drop all the country-level domains. Twitter.de dropped, Twitter.ca,
Okay.
and some people re-registered those.
Yeah.
I'm sure they're getting some decent traffic, to monetize.
Of course, yeah.
But he just felt it wasn't important enough, even though he kind of does understand domains. I mean, x.com is a great domain. There aren't very many single-letter.com domains.
True.
So, you can see that he understands some of it, but obviously he didn't see any value in the local presence variants of Twitter for some weird point. I mean, it was funny to see them pop up throughout all the countries when they were deleting. Because if you let one go in the process of transferring your domains, for example, you can be sure if there's traffic or potential to sell the domain, somebody will try to pick it up, and they will likely be, or they're more likely to be more successful than you, because they know how to do it. Because
Fair enough.
Because the process is complicated, different from top-level domain to top-level domain, and especially in country levels, there's specific services that can help you acquire them. But if you're not in this industry, you're lost. You don't know how that works, because timing is weird, and everybody has their own.
I'm just the user that is trying to move some domain names, and you really cross your fingers that it goes. Everybody gets the email, everybody replies in time, and that your transfer code, your DNS sec, that it all comes together, and you even go and sacrifice a goat somewhere just to make very sure that it just goes over.
Right, and then the rest is easy. You just need to change the IP addresses to your new servers. Re-establish DNSSEC.
Yep.
Make sure your SPF records and DMARC records are set up correctly.
Everybody always forgets the SPF records.
Until the email doesn't get delivered.
Unless, because everybody is using now cloud-based accounting software, which is sending your invoices through your email address.
For sure.
And then suddenly these no longer arrive. And then why not? You moved over the system and you broke everything. And of course, the feedback you get is our email doesn't work.
Right. That's easy, no?
That's
easy to diagnose.
It's easy to diagnose. Email doesn't work, and then I sent you an email. It's clearly
email. Does it mean your email bounces? Does it mean
it doesn't
you're getting
work.
a timeout when you're trying? Yes,
it doesn't work.
But you always get very qualified reports of issues like that.
Yes, of course,
sure.
because it's from people that are not used to diagnose things, and they had their local support company when they were independent, but now that they're part of Megacorp, they have to call the service desk. And then it's the email doesn't work. And the service desk person says, email doesn't work equals P1. And then next 5 minutes later, you're in a CERT meeting that at the newly acquired company, the email doesn't work. And it does work. And when you dig, they can't send invoices anymore. And then from experience, you come to the TXTs and the DMARCs and the SPF records, hey, did we transfer those? Because, we didn't get a zone file and we might not have copied them over.
Well, you should capture them as part of the transfer process, but likely in your transition, you're also going to change your email providers, I think.
You will.
We're not talking about migrating email here. That's always fun, too.
It doesn't. First of all, you do a DNS migration so that you have control over the DNS records.
Right.
And then the next step will include moving over the mailboxes from 365 tenant to tenant or Google Mail to, heaven forbid, on-prem. But who knows if you're into that.
Yeah, no, not so much. Email is kind of support intense and failure rich. To say the least.
And it's very much generalized to not work.
We choose not to have any subscription model nor sponsoring in order to keep our stories accessible for each and everyone. To support us, please check our merchandise at shop.ithorrorstories.eu or buy us a coffee at ko-fi.com/ithorrorstories.
We now return to our episode of today.
Yes, for sure. What are the other scenarios? I mean, your registrar could screw you over or something like that. I mean, there used to be, we were talking about taking ownership of the domain.
Yeah.
There was a story that most people in the industry kind of would know, where Registrar Fly was a a company that was selling domains very cheap. They were a reseller initially. They managed to become an ICANN accredited registrar, so on the accurate level. I don't know how they managed that part. And since they disappeared and without having all of the correct customer data on file, it was really hard. Like, so when ICANN did have a process for a registrar going out of business, and there's also something called registrar data escrow, which kind of means you store the information that is in the that is the whois information, kind of the ownership information of the domain and what is used to manage it in a backup database. Used to be mostly with Iron Mountain. Most of them are now with DNS, which is also the German registry operator. In any case, so now the obligation is to store the underlying data. Like, as you know, most registrars have whois privacy, that to hide your information for protecting, to comply with GDPR and so on.
If you do a whois of a domain, you get nothing back.
Yeah, basically you can't really find the owner or contact the owner anymore, which makes a domain selling and buying domain names a bit more complicated too. But in any case, so the registrar itself in the ICANN world is kind of obliged to store the whois information once a week or once a day, depending on your size. And at that point, there was no obligation to store the underlying whois information, meaning if it's private, that you have the actual ownership of the domain. So for Registerfly, and I also think they failed to submit their deposits in general. So for them, this information was missing. So you have like 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 domains, and you don't actually know who owns them. Maybe they can prove by like the original receipt or something like that. It's a big mess to track something like that down. So those rules have improved slightly, and potentially you're more likely to be safe in a scenario like this. But it does happen on occasion that somebody goes out of business or disappears. Usually they don't pay their ICANN fees anymore, and that's how they
and then they just get dropped.
Get kicked out after a while. And ICANN offers to transfer the domains to somebody else, tries to find another registrar that will take kind of aligns with the offering and the region where the customers were. That's often a mess too, though. Still to mention that afterwards, because then everybody has to coordinate together to collect the data, make sure the data is right, import the customers, and so on. Not an easy process either, usually on the registrar side. Yeah, so I don't know. You got your domain transferred. And your DMARC.
And then you're basically good to go for your next step, which would be then migrate any web hosting services, do your email, and any crazy application on a subdomain that some company built in for you. That there's like configuration tools for paint color to automate any quote requests.
Yes, your web UI design guide is probably on the subdomain, maybe a wiki, an internal wiki or something.
Well, let's just hope that they didn't name their internal Active Directory to an external domain name.
Yes,
because that has happened as well, and that's well. Now you have an AD migration to go with it at the same time.
I mean, actually, there's a process at ICANN. So when there's an upcoming round for applying for new top-level domains, and there's a collision in the evaluation of new applications. There's a collision part of the process where basically ICANN turns on the made-up TLD that doesn't exist at that point yet temporarily, and checks if there's any queries for it, like .internal or something like that. Commonly used
internal .local.
Yeah, and so they wouldn't allow you to register that or create that as a top-level domain. But it's an interesting measurement. I mean, even at one point, VeriSign, the .com registry, decided that they should try what happens if they let all .com domains resolve, no matter if they were registered or not.
Oh, lovely!
Because they figured it was a good opportunity to display advertising on it and earn some extra cash, which actually resulted in a lawsuit between VeriSign and ICANN. because I can kind of said, no, you can't do this. And then VeriSign said, who are you to tell us? and the rest is kind of settled out of court. So I'm not sure what exactly happened. But to me, the result of that seems to be that VeriSign can increase their prices almost every year by up to, what is the percentage? I don't know, 7 to 10% or something like that. But they can't do this for the next 2 years because the Department of Commerce got involved at one point and set some limits on the price increases.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But this is kind of what brought registries in general, domain registries, like the ones that own the top-level domain, the ability to increase prices at will, especially in the new top-level domains. They just need to tell you ahead of time, and then your registrar needs to tell you too, because they forget often. That's not in the ICANN rules, that part. But
it's
it's just like, you're going to be paying, as of next year, you're going to be paying for your domains. You paid $10 so far. Next year, it's going to be $1,000 a year. It's not unheard of. So I'm not.
Yeah. Some of those TLDs, they will say, oh yeah, we give you a good deal initially, and then after a few years, it just like skyrockets.
So yeah, that's on the registry side, but sometimes it's on the registrar side usually, but also on the registry side. I mean, registrars are known for. Registrars actually don't make much money on the domains. Nah. They have very low margins, and that's why they will say, "Oh, we will give you the first year for $1, but for the second year you pay the normal price double."
Yep.
Instead. So we add that all into your cart together, and now you're paying more than at other registrars, but it looked cheaper before.
Well,
it sells.
Many people just forget about the domain names. The renewal invoice comes in and they just pay it because it's a domain name, we must use it. If it's actually online for something, but they just get the invoice and it's paid. And if you forget this for 3-4 years, it's basically free money.
Well, there's also the Domain Registry of Europe and Domain Registry of America and Domain Registry of Canada, which is a fake. Well, it's a registrar, but they will send you renewal reminders for the domains that you have registered elsewhere. Yep. When they can still access your postal address, that is, because they actually did come in the mail, those letters, and they will incent you to renew their domain with them. And if you look in the fine print, it talks about the transfer of the domain.
It's a transfer, yeah. I haven't seen those letters in quite a while.
Well, that's because of who is being private. That kind of fixed this. But don't worry, the next EU regulation is coming soon where we'll have to provide more data to register domains.
Oh, lovely.
Because you're a criminal by default, and we need to make sure that we have all the information when you're
a criminal. The thing, I had some customers trying to register domains randomly in some countries, and now no, you need a valid phone number. Suddenly, so some are asking more than others, and if you just type in an obviously fake phone number, it won't take.
Yeah, so they
do a check.
There's KYC requirements to know your customer, kind of that are going almost to a level where banks are now, a bit. And it's painful for a registrar too, because you spend a lot of money on enforcing these and getting info and validating it. And it is like making everybody a criminal by default. The whole the latest directive that is coming up and is ready or proposed for implementation in the EU countries is NIS2. And that's it's basically like a KYC regulation for domain and hosting companies.
It's everywhere, as many online things have NIS2 requirements coming. Had some banks already implementing it, and they're just not prepared to handle all of that, let alone to ask it, let alone then to verify it. So if you're now also going to do that to domains, then you will, the next requirement will be your shoe size.
Yeah, of course, shoe size, blood type, the usual stuff.
Well, some countries have that on their driver's license already. So
that's for other purposes, hopefully for other purposes. But so I think. There are some requirements already for validation, like ICANN requires the address to be in a valid format. It doesn't mean that it needs to be a real address, but and you need to verify at least the email address. Phone number is an option there, and some registrars may already do that. And NIS2 is depending on how the individual countries in Europe are going to implement it, is going to make some of those requirements worse. However, I don't think, I guess I don't really have to say it, but this doesn't prevent any crime, because if you are a criminal, you can come up with a valid address and phone number and that is not traceable to you. It's not.
There are certain corners of the internet where you can just buy those lists.
It's not that hard, and of course it creates more data of all of us that is out there, usually with some other external provider, because the registrars don't implement this themselves. It's actually, it's creating business, so let's not forget that part.
True.
Just look at how many people can provide your cookie consent policies for your website nowadays. Since GDPR, it's fairly regulated, so you usually outsource that too, because it's too hard to keep track of all the individual rules. And we'll have the same here. There's actually already some new address validation companies that are coming out of nowhere and competing over price. So we'll see where that goes.
We're going to keep that for a different episode.
Yes.
I think here we've explained fun with domain names. We have touched fun with DNS.
There's more fun to be had, but but wait, there's more.
There's more, but that's going to be in a different episode.
That's fine. Thank you, Jack.
No, Chris, thanks for joining. Appreciate your input and your history in the field. I hope everybody listening picked something new up, had some good laughs, and as always, thanks for tuning in. And as our messages will tell you, follow us on all the socials, do the likes, the subscribes, the thumbs up.
Don't forget the notification bell.
Oh yes, the notification bell if you're on that platform. Because
otherwise you might not see it.
Yeah, because otherwise the artificial intelligence is working against us.
Right.
All right, everybody. Thanks a lot for tuning in. See you next time.
Cheers.
The content of this podcast is intended for entertainment purposes only and is meant to humorously explore various tech-related situations. Any resemblance to actual events or real persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. We ridicule situations, never individuals or groups. Listener discretion is advised, and we encourage everyone to approach technology with a sense of humor and an open mind.